All right, thanks a lot, Rishi. And indeed, we are speaking about therapy works, and this morning with me is occupational therapist Klaudia Lacina, and we are going to speak about self-regulation. So firstly, Klaudia, good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome. And what is self-regulation?
So self-regulation is the ability to manage and regulate your alertness levels and your emotions. So it's also being able to express your emotions in a way that's socially acceptable. So for this to be successful, there are three main components of self-regulation. The first one is the executive functioning. So
what is executive functioning?
That relates to your cognitive processes. So that's the way we think, we problem solve. It's how we shift attention, it's our memory, it's also our self-talk. So that's the first part of the self-regulation. The second is the sensory processing regulation. So that refers to making sense of all the sensory stimuli we receive from our environment. So that would be what we see, what we hear, and also filtering which ones are important to attend to and which ones we shouldn't be focused on,
okay.
so we don't get distracted.
Right.
And the third part is the emotional regulation. So as the name suggests, that's regulating emotions, being able to control your emotions.
You know, to how you process the things you feel and how
Absolutely,
to
yes,
basically respond.
And not always act on how we
Right.
feel as well, so being able to control that.
Okay, so if somebody is somewhat erratic, they may need to see someone to receive therapy.
A person with, or a child with self-regulation processes would, self-regulation issues would struggle with these kind of things. So maybe the emotions would be dysregulated, so you would get angry more often. If it's sensory issues, that would present differently as well.
All right, so why is it important for a child to have good self-regulation skills?
So to be successful at self-regulation, it's very important to be successful at pretty much any task throughout the day. So whether it's at home, whether it's at school, whether it's in community, children do experience a lot of challenges. As they get to know the world, they experience a lot of emotions. Some of them they might not be able to understand, some of them they might not be able to express, and that can affect how successful they are in learning and playing and making friends, but also facing challenges, learning how to handle challenges, and becoming more independent.
Okay.
So if these skills are learned at an early age, you can imagine that gives them such a good head start later in life, because self-regulation is something that a lot of adults struggle with as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's something that goes from childhood into adulthood if it's not treated? It's not
related to diagnosis. It's not a problem that we all struggle with self-regulation at times.
Right.
You wake up in the morning, you go to work, the traffic's really bad, right?
Right.
You will get angry, you might need to stop yourself from shouting at someone, in a car next to you. We all get tired, we need something to wake us up, we're gonna have a cup of coffee. So we use our self-regulation skills all the time.
Right.
The problem is where they're not developed enough to help us behave in a socially acceptable way, to help us make friends, in a case of a child, to be able to participate in a class. So if these challenges stopping us from reaching our potential and doing the sort of everyday tasks, that's where you're looking at therapy involvement.
Okay, so what are some of the signs that one needs to look out for in regards to self-regulation? In a child, that is.
Yeah, different children will present these issues differently, obviously. For some kids, it could be maybe not being able to pay attention during class. Maybe they can't copy things from the board. They can't follow instructions very well. Maybe the attention shifting part isn't working very well, so that will affect their ability to participate in class. If it's more of an emotion regulation piece, that could be things such as anger outbursts. They might have big reactions to small problems. They might get very easily upset. You might be seeing some challenging behaviors. It could also be a child that maybe gets upset very easily and they tend to cry a lot and have a meltdown. If it's a sensory piece that's a problem, you might be looking at a child who fidgets a lot, let's say during class, who can't sit still. Maybe they're very sensitive to noises or to light. Or you might have a child who seems to be zoning out, so it seems like they're not paying attention, but they might actually be focusing on a background noise. And that's where you're looking at mostly kids with self-regulation issues are those who are very often being told by parents or teachers to sit still, stop fidgeting, eyes on the board.
Right.
Why don't you just be quiet? These kind of things we've all heard at some point in our lives.
Right.
But very often, unfortunately, some of these kids might end up with a reputation of a bad or a naughty child.
Okay.
No child wants such reputation.
Right,
So
yes.
this is why it's so important to recognize and address these issues as soon as possible.
And
So
speaking about addressing it, you from your perspective as an occupational therapist, how do you address this issue?
So at Therapy Works, we actually see quite a lot of children with self-regulation issues. Sometimes it is related to a neurological problem. It could be related to a diagnosis such as autism or ADHD.
Okay.
Sometimes it's an issue by its own. So the way I would usually address it is to teach children about self-regulation.
Okay.
What is it? Why is it important? To give them the tools and strategies to address it themselves. One of the main ways of doing it for me is for a zones of regulation group that I lead at Therapy Works.
Could you repeat that, sorry?
Zones of regulation group.
Okay.
So this is a curriculum that's specifically designed for children. It's very child-friendly in terms of language. To give them the knowledge and the skills to be more successful at self-regulation.
Okay. All right. Well, what we can do is actually save your contact information of Therapy Works, and we could have it at our front desk where Noreen would be glad to relay that information to anybody who saw this segment and they realize, okay, maybe my child or my loved one needs to learn self-regulation skills, you know, in regards to treatment and their options available.
Yeah.
All right, Klaudia Lacina, occupational therapist, thank you so much for being here this morning and sharing all you have shared with us.